In a truly tragic turn of events, the Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security has determined that an astonishing 500,000 migrant children who entered this country illegally during the Biden regime went missing. Now, the Trump administration, notably border czar Tom Homan, have made it their self-professed mission to locate every one of these kids and return them to their homelands. But where do these kids get off to? How is it even possible that our elephantine federal government, with all its workers and money, could have lost so many children over the course of 4 years? A recent congressional testimony by Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. shed some light on these things.
The Biden administration lost track of all those children is because they were emphasizing speed over security. And there were political reasons for that. They wanted to get the kids out of U.S. custody, so they were handing them off to anybody. They didn't require background checks. They didn't require identification even. I've watched horror stories of the same person picking up child after child after child, using different names and different addresses. One of the addresses was a strip club. One of the addresses was a parking lot. One of the addresses was an empty lot that was filled with shipping containers. And this character was getting all these kids. One person got 42 kids to one address.
The New York Post described the Biden regime's program of placing migrant kids with the nearest adult as a conveyor belt of rape and torture for some children, some of whom were just toddlers and babies. We're now joined by our friend and whistleblower Tara Lee Rodas. She was a former HHS employee who, after volunteering to help sort out the unaccompanied minor crisis that erupted during Biden's shambolic tenure in office, turned into a federal whistleblower at DHS because of the shoddy handling of the migrant children, or intentional in my terms, by Biden's team. Tara Lee, we figured the numbers were more, and I would first pose the question to you, is this even accurate? Because as I heard your colleague Erin Stevenson say on DC Dispatch with Christy Lee last week, we could, and I thought she had a good analogy, there's some children we don't even know about, right? Because they were essentially like gotaways. They were brought across the border, not at entry points, not captured by CBP, but they were brought in and we don't even know about them. So do we even have any real idea of how many children were brought in and trafficked during Biden's term?
Well, first, Emerald, it's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for continuing to shine a light on the crisis of the missing children. And unfortunately, we don't have an accurate number. Most recently, Stephen Miller said he now believes it is over 450,000 children missing. And yes, DHS analyst, right? So Intel analyst Erin Stevenson, as we've talked through this, the numbers could eclipse 1 million children. Because remember, the unaccompanied children program was only one way bad actors were getting the children across the border. They were taking them, like you said, undetected. So without inspection, they would get across the border by somebody. And then also fake family units. So we won't know the real numbers until we start doing the data analytics, which is what we've been pushing for, is a whole of government approach, a data analytics solution to go after not where the child was released to, but to go after the sponsor themselves. And this is something that nobody really wants to do. So we'll see.
Wait, what do you mean? Nobody? Is there still a hesitancy to go after the sponsors, to charge them, to put them in prison?
Oh, there absolutely is. Not on the part of the new Trump administration, of course. And border czar Tom Homan, not on his part, but there are still people embedded within the agencies. And this is something, that everybody needs to understand. Policy is personnel. Who you have working at your agency and who's willing to carry out the mission that you've given them. So although there are some great people who have been embedded at the agencies, it's not everybody. And so there has been, since the beginning of this program, a very, very staunch line in the sand. They will not turn over all the sponsor data. So they actually have like consular IDs. They have passports of who these fraudulent sponsors are. And I haven't gotten confirmation yet from anyone that they actually are going after them using that information. So I'm curious how helpful some of the old guard at HHS is being.
That is extremely disturbing, Tara. We've seen it happening. I mean, we see it happening across agencies, and people get upset with me because I talk about this so much, right? The problems that exist still in the bureaucracy, in the administrative state, that have yet to be rooted out. And let's say it's, HHS, it's very detrimental because, of course, it comes down to policy on the mRNA jazz. But when you're saying that we still have this problem, DHS, or in the relevant sub-agencies, that deals with trying to find these children, or the law enforcement that's supposed to be prosecuting these sponsors, this is life and death for children. This is torture.
Yes, it is.
For children.
Yes, it is. And if anybody has been following some of the cases that have come out over the last 2 weeks, it's horrifying. And I am not ashamed to say I've cried a lot of tears over this, but reading through some of the stories that have come through over the last 2 weeks, it's been just heartbreaking. Toddlers, I mean, as you know, there was a Walmart full of infants in Texas, and the MVM whistleblower, Carlos Ariano, delivered infants across the country in the middle of the night. So they could be 3 and 4 years old now. If anybody was following that Alabama case of the Sureño, imagine that, a criminal alien, sex trafficking children out of a basement. I'd be curious to know, was he a sponsor of kids? Were any of the kids he had unaccompanied children? What about the bust where they got the guys in Florida with the 7-year-old girl who they had been sexually abusing? I mean, was she an unaccompanied minor? Did they sponsor her? These are questions that I would love to see the answer to. I believe that if they target the sponsor, that's what they need to do, is go after every single sponsor. They have all their information. They have trained people who can help. So remember, HHS is not a law enforcement entity. So that's why DHS, using Homeland Security investigations, is going out to find the children. So HHS is not a law enforcement agency, which is a big reason why this crisis was created. They simply don't have the tradecraft, the knowledge, skills, or ability to keep kids out of the hands of traffickers. But we have great data analysts. I mean, people like Aaron Stevenson, and also we could pull in people at the National Counterterrorism Center, the Terrorist Screening Center, the National Targeting Center. All these people can provide manpower and tradecraft. And the reason why I think they're not doing that approach right now is we've only seen 400 plus sponsors arrested. If they watch listed these people, we'd have thousands. We'd have thousands of arrests immediately and of high-level criminal actors, because we know that members of transnational organized crime, they got the kids. MS-13, 18th Street Gang, and other unsavory characters were sponsors of children.
It just makes me sick at my stomach. And you mentioned the case of the illegal that was trafficking the children out of the basement. That did actually get a little bit of national attention, but most of these stories, that you have to really kind of be looking for them to find them. Though it should be on the front page of every newspaper, as atrocious as it is. He was a member of a transnational gang, right? He was a member of a gang, and he was an illegal criminal alien. You noted that it's not really the political appointees, right? It's the existing, the people who are already working at DHS, that there seems to be a problem. You noted the kind of people they could bring in there, right? You listed some like Aaron Stevenson, and then people from other groups that could come in. Could
Absolutely.
they get these people to act? I I think it's such an overwhelming problem. It's hard to even know where to begin. But it sounds like you all have the people who would know where to begin. And then do you have to fire some of these people who are refusing to go after the sponsors?
Absolutely. If you're refusing a direct order, bye. I mean, go do a job that you want to do. If you want to work in the federal government, you need to do what your superiors are saying. And so at HHS, we're very fortunate that they have a team over there. I think I mentioned the last time I was on, they have made headway in terms of closing the loops to protect the kids. So they have DNA testing now to ensure proof of relationship. Imagine that. Can you believe that the Biden administration handed children over to anybody? Secretary Kennedy said it was speed over security. We said it was speed over safety. In the recent hearing that Clay Higgins had with the Honorable Joseph Kafari of Department of Homeland Security, Office of Inspector General, he said it was catch and release and then lose and forget.
Mm.
And that's what they did. They don't care about these children. They really don't. Now, the new administration obviously does. They have the DNA testing. They're requiring official identification. You can't just turn in some international driver's license. Fingerprinting of all adults in the household, verification of proof of income. They want to make sure that these children are not being put to work in slave labor, which we know they are. They're being found in factories and slaughterhouses and marijuana grows in California. I mean, this is absolutely, and sadly, in other terrible, terrible situations. So the new staff over there at ORR, Acting Director Salazar, she's former Homeland Security Investigations, one of their senior advisors, Fabricator, he is former Immigration and Customs Enforcement, so he's former ICE. And they've been getting some stuff done in terms of closing the loops for the future. The challenge is going back to find the children that came through in such a careless way and went to fraudulent sponsors and criminal sponsors.
I mean, the book should be thrown at those sponsors, those criminal sponsors who are trafficking children. And like you said, there needs to
Absolutely.
be an example made. And it was very interesting after your last appearance on the show. There was a White House briefing immediately after our noon hour, and after you joined us at the top of the noon show, and we talked about the need to show the mugshots, right? Plaster those people's faces everywhere. Well,
Absolutely.
ironically, they did that. It wasn't with sponsors, though. It was illegal criminal aliens, many who had committed the crime of, say, sexual assault, but it wasn't necessarily the sponsors who had trafficked children. You say there's been
Right.
some 400 arrests of sponsors, though. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yes. Yes, that is what Inspector General Kafari shared at the hearing that was just about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, with Clay Higgins. It was an oversight hearing.
Right.
And yeah, anybody can go watch that. If you need to find it, it's you can find it on my X page. The only thing that's there pretty much is just information and recent things about the trafficking of the children, and as they rescue children or as they arrest sponsors or if they're holding critical hearings on this issue. Yeah, I try to keep all that up to date for people.
Yeah. They need to take some of those people, right? Some of those criminal sponsors, and do a similar briefing from the White House briefing room, showing their pictures like they did some of the other criminal aliens, and highlighting that issue. Then they need to take your recommendations, hire back Aaron, hire some of these other people, or detail them to DHS that knows how to do this work. Like you said, it's real tradecraft. Okay, it's a
Yeah.
specialized skill set, if you will, and they sound like they really need that support. So I hope whoever is watching today hears this and implements those changes at DHS, because it is literally life and death and torture for hundreds of thousands of kids, Tara.
And small children, that's the thing I think that most people just don't, they can't wrap their minds around. And I think it's why many people, they when they hear about this issue, they just want to run away. They're like, no, 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 I don't want to know, because it takes a very sick and wicked person to violate the innocence of a toddler, 3 years old, 4 years old, and younger. I mean, infants. Some of the stories I've heard are just, I can't even repeat. It's really sad. Evil people walk among us, and they prey
Yeah.
on the innocent and the vulnerable. And we've got to get these kids, because many of them were infants when they came over. I mean, we had children as young as 5 on our site. So, today that child might be 9. They can't fend for themselves. These children cannot fend for themselves. And so we need to go after them. And if anybody's in California, I do want to put in a plug for one thing. Our Project Defend and Protect Our Children, our Get in the Fight campaign, is coming to Oxnard, California. And we will be there the weekend of the 22nd, 23rd. And we equip people to identify trafficking indicators and then be able to report. Most importantly, we teach parents, grandparents, how to keep your own kids safe. They have to know what grooming looks like, right? They have to understand, because these criminal networks that are here trafficking the migrant children, they're also after the American children. If you notice, that Sereno, he had a mixture of kids. So
Yeah.
no trafficking operation only has, or typically, they're going to be like, oh no, I'm not going to worry about bringing other children into my operation. No, if they can get their hands on your kid, they're going to go after your kid too.
Yeah, and again, that's in Oxnard, California. If you're in the area, it's not too far from the Mexico border with California, but California is just problematic altogether up and down the state, especially with their policy related to children, right? They're not very pro-parent in policy.
No.
So like you said, it's not just about protecting these migrant children who were brought in. It's about protecting your own kids from these criminals who have made their way into our country. I see a lot of great faces there. Lara Logan, General Mike
Yes.
Flynn. It looks like, Mike Smith and Liz Crokin are going to be doing a panel. So it'd just be a fantastic event. A lot of people we have right here on this show. Where do they go to find out more about the event, Tara? What URL?
So they can go to americasfuture.net, americasfuture.net, click on Project Defend and Protect, and then they can click on events, and they'll be able to see it. And my great buddy Aaron Stevenson will be there. Jason Jones is going to be there. Jason, it's interesting. People laughed at Jason 8 years ago when he said we need to designate the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. But a lot of the work that Jason did really has paved the way to help, right, as the Trump administration has secured the border and began deportation of these high-level criminal actors. And that's what I think some people haven't quite made the connection with, is that these sponsors, most are criminal, illegal aliens. So they're illegal. So we were handing children over to illegals who couldn't support them. So we wonder why, they were put into all these horrible situations. But it's just, they've never gone after this problem in this way because HHS never wanted to give up the sponsor data. They don't want, I think they didn't want people to realize the sponsors were illegal. So I think that's a shock to most people. So we had a white glove delivery service of children to illegals here, which doesn't really pass the common sense test, obviously. And they've never wanted to give up that data. And it's a mystery because they could, in about 6 weeks, go through that data, just match it with some other databases, and they would be able to see, wow, all these people are MS-13, these are Serenos, this is 18th Street Gang, this is this cartel, here's the Gulf Cartel, has all these kids. It really is a simple solution. Data analytics, the puzzle is just laid out for you when you look at the data, and that's what they're going to need to do.
I'll admit, prior to the Biden regime, I had no idea what a cartel problem we had. And it's not just, the Mexican cartels. I mean, these cartels are transnational criminal organizations. They're well organized. They commit the amounts of money laundering, drug trafficking, human and child trafficking that you can't even fathom. We're just now starting to, I think, to get a handle on it, Tara. So we're going to keep covering this. It relates to a lot of the other transnational organized crime that we talk about right here on this show. I think people are waking up to it. People in our government just didn't even understand. And many of them, though, are bought off and influenced by them. We're learning, right? So that's hence why we continue to even have this problem, I think, with the kids. Tara Lee, thank you so much for what you all do, especially at America's Futures. If you're in Oxnard, California, or somewhere that you can get there, it'll be a great event. Very worthy event to attend, and I know you all have more coming up from America's Future as well that we'll share later. I got a call yesterday, so you guys just keep moving, keep going.
Yep, we're going
keep
to.
trucking forward. You're doing such good work. Thank you, Tara Lee.
Thank you, Emerald, and thank you for being in this fight to protect the children. We really appreciate you, and I appreciate you. So thank you so much.
That means a lot to me. Up next, we'll do the geopolitical global tour on what's going on multiple fronts, be it Russia or Venezuela. That's after the break.
With everybody talking about making America healthy again, I thought today'd be a great day to talk to all my fellow patriots about the importance of making your homes healthy again. Use code Lindell for 20% off in savings and free shipping. That's promo code Lindell at airwaterhealing.com.
In what is a very serious developing story, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has flown to Moscow and is currently meeting with Russia's leaders, including, as you can see from this image, with Russian President Vladimir Putin himself. The hope, and at this point, given all that has transpired in the last 45 days between the West and Russia over Ukraine, the hope is all we have is that Trump's representative and Putin's team can get moving on a real peace plan for Ukraine. But negotiations will be difficult these days in the wake of the Twitter war that erupted last week between the former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev and President Trump, in which Medvedev, who is also the Deputy National Security Advisor for the Russian Federation, made a nuclear threat against NATO. That prompted this response from President Trump on his Truth Social account, where he said, quote, based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I've ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. As a result of those nasty words exchanged between Moscow and Washington, Russia did 2 things that are highly provocative. First, they formally withdrew from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, or INF, treaty. Second, word got out that Moscow was in talks with the Maduro regime of Venezuela about potentially basing some of Russia's advanced hypersonic Oreshnik missiles in Venezuela. This is a story that our friend Brendan Weicker, the current senior national security editor of the National Interest, has been tracking, and we're joined by him and also retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Rob Maness, who is the host of the Rob Maness Show, which you can listen to on Spotify and iTunes. Welcome, gentlemen.
It's good to be here.
Good to be here.
Okay, let me ask you, because I remember back to a time in what was it, like 2018, when Kim Jong-un and President Trump were going back and forth on social media, similar to this. And of course the left was crying, he's going to get us killed. They're going to launch a nuclear attack at us, and he is playing with fire. Is this perhaps a similar scenario, Colonel Maness?
Well, this is peace through strength. This is what nuclear deterrence looks like, Emerald. And that means that we now have a president that understands what it means to message to the president of Russia, who, through his proxies like Medvedev, have been nuclear saber rattling since the current part of this war with Ukraine started in late February 2022. And Joe Biden's administration did nothing to respond to any of these threats. What the president of the United States just did is said, hey, Call your attack dog off. Tell Medvedev to shut up and stop threatening nuclear weapons use. And by the way, I'm repositioning some nuclear submarines just as a reminder, Vlad, that we are the big dog in the fight with U.S. nuclear submarines that Russia doesn't have enough of to keep at sea 100% of the time and be unknown with sea-launched ballistic missiles that can range them from almost anywhere. Now, the president nuanced that tweet. He didn't say which nuclear submarines or which types of nuclear submarines, and that's the appropriate way to still have a little bit of ambiguity to it, but the message is clear. Call off your attack dog, stop the threats. We are serious about this business. Let's get to the peace table. And that sets the stage for Witkoff's visit to actually see the real president, Vladimir Putin, this week. It probably wouldn't have happened that way had the president not tweeted that. And he's using it much like the, in the Cold War days, we had the hotline between the Pentagon and the Kremlin.
Yeah.
And with Twitter and those kinds of platforms, now you can do it directly, and this president do it himself, and I'm not surprised at all that he did it.
Foreign policy through social media. I mean, that is the state of things. That's where we find ourselves now. Okay, so Colonel Manus, you sound like, oh, well, Russia doesn't have the same capability of us. But Brandon, Putin says he's moving these missiles. Is he really? And should we be that concerned? Does Russia have any capability to really hurt us?
Well, that's a great question. Let me just first apologize. I have workers on my roof right now, so that's what you're hearing.
Brandon's getting a new roof,
They're not,
y'all.
they're
I
not
thought it
coming
was
for
mine.
me.
I have workers in the house too, and I couldn't tell.
They're not
It's the
coming for me
Russians.
yet.
It's the Russians at your door.
But no, that's a great question, Emerald. And what I'll say is I don't think we're going into nuclear war, but what I do think is an unnecessary degree of escalation and destabilization from both the United States side and the Russian side. I think the colonel is correct here when he says this was sort of like the Cold War days back when we would kind of posture. But the bottom line is this. Because the Russians now possess the Oreshnik hypersonic weapon, we don't have a defense against that. And furthermore, we don't have our own system. We're still developing ours. Russia has now gone into mainline production of their Oreshnik. You mentioned the INF treaty. We pulled out of that in 2018, but interestingly, the Russians maintained their commitment to that. They were trying to play nice with us for the last several years on that front. But because of the sort of blow up between Medvedev and Trump, now Putin had, he thinks, an excuse to not only move IRBMs into Belarus, the first time since the Cold War, but also he's talking about Oreshniks. With the Venezuelan situation, they're talking about it. I don't know yet if they're going to do it, but Emerald, you've been all over this story for years now, the Venezuelan destabilization of the United States. Should the Russians feel sufficiently threatened by these back and forths on Twitter, and should they feel they're not getting what they think they should be getting in Europe, the likelihood increases that with the Oreshnik, they will move a handful of those systems into Venezuela just to stick it in our face. That is a highly destabilizing action, and I blame the Twitter spat between Medvedev and Trump for this, because I don't think that Putin was even considering that possibility before this. Lastly, I'll just say, I actually think Putin may have played Trump. He wanted to have an excuse to get out of the INF and move these systems mainly into Belarus as part of his final, what he thinks is his final offensive into Ukraine. By that Twitter spat and the president saying, I'm moving these submarines into the region, which I think they probably were already there. But by announcing it, that gave Putin the excuse he needed now to go full bore with moving these IRBMs and Oreshniks into Belarus, which is right next to Ukraine. So all of this, I think, was a misstep by both Russia and the United States. But I do think Putin is exploiting this much better so far than we are.
Yeah. Let's actually listen to what Putin had to say about those IRBMs, the Oreshniks. Listen.
The first thing I wanted to say in this connection, we have already manufactured the first serial production Oreshnik missile complex, and it's already been fielded. It is now serially produced weapon.
All right, Brandon.
That was his announcement of they're now mass producing the Oreshnik. That's all he was saying.
Hmm. That's a good point about in 2018. I remember reporting on that from the North Lawn when the U.S. was saying, "Oh well, we feel like the treaty isn't, is almost obsolete for today's times." Right? Wasn't that the issue? And Trump wanted to renegotiate it. And you're right. I had kind of forgotten about that. Russia chose to stay in it.
But the reason we
So
pulled out
interesting
was actually
times.
China. China was not signatory to that treaty, which is the
Yeah.
real reason we pulled out in 2018.
And
I
that
would also
segues us
add that
perfectly.
the treaty
Go
was
ahead.
stacked against us. The IRBM
Yeah.
treaty was stacked against us, and Europe always was. And I was one of the advocates urging the president to pull out of that treaty back then because the Russians are producing IRBMs. The Russian is
Right. Right.
is the primo one of that. This thing about Venezuela, though. While I don't disagree with you, Brandon, about it being significant, Putin's got to remember what happened in the early years of the 1960s with the Cuban Missile
Yeah.
Crisis. And this president is not going to tolerate any encroachment of Russia's intermediate range or even intercontinental ballistic missiles encroaching into this hemisphere. If you look
Yeah.
at the policies they've been implementing since he came back into office to protect this hemisphere, he's not going to tolerate it. And I think that's just for show and messaging purposes. But
You're
I
probably
absolutely
right.
agree about Belarus.
But
A lot of people are
Emerald, you've
liking
been
this to the Cuban Missile Crisis.
yeah, it could
I'm
be.
sorry.
And Emerald, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, so many people are likening this to the Cuban Missile Crisis, actually.
Not yet, but it could be. Could turn into
It
that.
could be. But, Emerald, you're reporting on Venezuela, and there's obviously a war going on within the administration between those who want to really stand strong against Venezuela and those like, certain people like Richard Grenell who continue to want to do business and cut deals with the Maduro regime. That war has been going on, and the recent Chevron license crisis. Whether they were going to get those renewed for Venezuelan operations or not. That fight happened about 2 months ago, and I know you were reporting on that. And my fear is that this plays into that, in that the Trump administration has not quite decided what it wants to do with Venezuela, and the longer it refuses to stand strong consistently against Maduro and maybe even attempt to get rid of Maduro, the greater the opening is for Russia to do something unpredictable like moving these systems into our hemisphere.
Yeah, there is a war behind the scenes between, on the Venezuela issue, and it's not just about Venezuela, right? It's those within our community our intel community that have been compromised by, believe it or not, the Cubans, of course,
Right.
also the Venezuelans and the Chinese, right? And Iranians. So you have this nexus right there in Venezuela. Speaking of the Chinese, I do want to touch on this because we haven't talked about Taiwan in a while. Taiwan's foreign minister is saying that China's invasion of outlying Taiwanese islands by China is imminent. So is China, we've been talking about this for years, let's be honest. We kept saying each August that China could be taking Taiwan, and they never did, all right? And we expected it before the 2024 election on the off chance that, which happened, Biden was replaced. So is China still trying to make moves against Taiwan, Colonel Manus?
Well, one of the indicators that I keep an eye on, I'm sure Brandon does too, is seeing movement on that western shoreline there to the west of Taiwan on the People's Republic of China. And there has been some indicators that amphibious ships are moving into position, may in fact be being loaded. So the indicators are starting to build that this could be a reality. But, they've been doing these massive exercises for several years now, a couple of times a year. And it could be one of those, but it's just another reason why we need to be prioritizing, focusing on our allies and our defenses and our strength in this area in order to deter China from actually trying to pull this off. And that's very concerning, especially with the Ukrainian situation, pulling our prioritization constantly in that direction when it's not a real threat to a vital national U.S. interest, other than one we've made up through our poor decision making, which is a reality now. But this is the real threat to our ability to operate, our freedom of navigation in the Pacific. And it's a vast area of operation that we just do not have, especially the naval capability and the dispersing airfields for our long range, especially our long range strike aircraft like the B-1 and B-52, B-2 bombers and B-21 bombers.
That's right. That's right. And what triggered, Colonel, what triggered I think it was the deputy foreign minister or the foreign minister who said this last week. What triggered that was this massive buildup, specifically in Fujian, which is right across the way from Taiwan. And that's one of the cities we look for when we're doing an analysis on this, because they're going to China would have to rally their forces in places like Fujian and Dalian in order to then sprint across 100-mile Taiwan Strait. Now, interestingly, and I wargamed this out last year at the Heritage Foundation when I played the China team in the war game for the election year. What we consented on, what we agreed on, was that China would likely not go for a full-bore invasion of Taiwan right off the bat. Once they decided to trigger an invasion or a blockade, they would probably first start by salami slicing Kinmen, Matsu, and the Penghu Islands, which is circled in that map there. The Penghu Islands are. They're sort of the front lines of any war with China for Taiwan. And those islands probably will fall very quickly. So we're seeing, I think, a buildup that is unusual. And those exercises that the Colonel referenced, I think the reason they do them so much at such a large scale is to numb our people, our intelligence analysts, and to confuse them to think, well, maybe this is just an exercise and maybe we won't build up.
The boy that cried wolf strategy.
That's right. That's right.
Because we've done a lot
I don't know
of
what
that,
the Chinese
let's be
equivalent
honest.
is, but yes. Yes.
And getting back to what Colonel Manus said about being overextended due to, our proxy war in Ukraine, I would assume that China's also watching the Middle East, right? And that brings us to the last topic in question, and that being that there are multiple signs of an impending new conflict in Israel and Iran, possibly starting between the 21st and 28th of this month. This is, obviously a kind of a non-open source intelligence account saying this, and this is due to embassy closures, noting rising drone activity. Is there any validity to this?
I think there is. I think that the 12-day war was just sort of the entree into a larger multi-phase campaign coordinated between the United States and its allies. I also think we had Lee Slusher on last time I guest hosted for you, and he was talking a lot about the Zangezur corridor in Azerbaijan. It looks a lot like Central Asia is about to become a new front, not only in the war for Europe, but also the war for the Middle East. Israel is operating a lot of resources out of Azerbaijan. They've been supporting the Azerbaijani regime as part of this move to build the Zangezur corridor, which will link Central Asian energy sources through the Middle East up into Turkey, with exit points in the new NATO base at the Black Sea in Romania. So there's definitely, I think, a long-term geopolitical move by Team America, and I think that another round of attacks against Iran is coming soon.
We'll see. There's also talk about Azerbaijan joining the Abraham Accords, right? Go ahead, Colonel Manus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. The risk is always there when you conduct warfare like the Israelis did, primarily through air operations and missile operations, and you don't have the ability to control territory and actually remove those threats, so the Iranians are free to reconstitute their forces in the best way they can. They have allies like China and North Korea and Russia. Although Russia's distracted, but their production capability is working very well thanks to a lot of poor decision-making by the West, NATO and the United States. So the reality is the risk has always been there, even though our forces and the Israeli forces did a great job taking apart the integrated air defense system and their air capability. They still had some offensive capability left, and it won't surprise me if this lights up again. And the Iranians are the ones that started, to be honest with
you. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we did do the tour around the globe on the ongoing conflicts or the impending ones. Thank you both. Wonderful insights. We appreciate you both joining us, and we will reconvene likely in a couple of weeks to see where we are, if you will, gentlemen. Thank you. Big news, a new California state bill, AB 495, is working its way through the Democratic Party-controlled state legislature. The bill is a real nightmare for parents, according to our next guest, and it represents the newest front in the Democrats' ongoing war on children and our parental rights. Among the many impositions on parental rights is the idea that a caregiver, such as a grandparent or even a school nurse, can override parental wishes when it comes to their children. In fact, this bill is so duplicitous that it simultaneously averts that a caregiver whose identity must remain anonymous to the parents can override anonymously the decision of a parent if the parent's decision conflicts with state laws. So that being like, for example, childhood vaccinations. And if a parent wants to find out who overrode their authority, well, because AB 495 is allegedly related to California's confidentiality laws for immigrants, dad is required to get a court order to find out who claimed legal guardianship over his child and authorized the immunization. According to one parental rights activist group, California's AB 495 weakens parental rights so much that someone can just walk away with your child. Luckily, California is not so far gone. The parents are just accepting Newsom's newest diktat. Parental rights groups throughout the Golden State are rallying against this proposed bill. Whether they can stop it or not remains unknown. But the fight to save our kids is just getting started. Now we're joined by the biotech analyst and author of the popular Kingston Report on Substack, who is following this disturbing story very closely. Karen, we talked about the missing children from HHS, and particularly as it relates to California a little bit earlier on the show. This is almost like state-sanctioned kidnapping, right? Some anonymous person can claim guardianship of your child and make parental decisions for your child without you knowing or even knowing who they are. I mean, this is so insane. It's so upside down. It's hard to believe that it's actually a real bill being put forth before a state legislature, even if it is California, Karen.
Oh, it's so evil and Luciferian, and it just annihilates any parental rights. It annihilates, the ability for parents to protect their children from child predators, literally, from the drug cartel. It actually annihilates immigrants' rights to protect their children from the drug cartel, because I don't know if many people know this, but a lot of families that were brought over the border, adults and children, the drug cartel assists them to get here, and then they have a debt to pay. And if they don't pay, the cartel takes their children. So this allows, essentially for human trafficking. It is the drug cartel's child trafficking, child kidnapping dream bill. And, there's two attorneys that are fighting this very hard, Nicole Pearson and Aaron Friday. And they know these laws much, much better than I do. But this is all allegedly, according to Assemblywoman Rodriguez, it's all allegedly to protect immigrant families in case they are separated due to federal immigration laws. And the truth is, when you read the language of the bill, this applies to all children. So it applies to American citizens, proper identification, it's their children, and anyone can walk in. They don't need to show a driver's license. They can give them a bogus social security, bogus medical number, a bogus name, a bogus address, and they don't have to have a parent's signature. So they're overriding all of the infrastructure and laws and help and support that's in place right now for immigration. And it's just legalizing child kidnapping. But it also is a nightmare, especially parents who co-parent and have joint parents, right? So during COVID, there were many divorced families that were fighting over whether or not, especially here in Southern California, because they were mandating the shots, on whether or not to get their child getting the COVID shots. And, under this law, one of the parents could supersede it, Or even if both parents agreed they shouldn't get the shot, but one of the grandparents thought they should, the grandparent could just go in, print out this form and go, I couldn't get in touch with mom and dad, give Johnny a shot. This whole thing is absolutely insane. It has to be stopped.
I am definitely glad that some of my family in California didn't have the authority to give my children COVID jabs, because I had some family that probably would have done that. This is absolutely terrifying. And you're right, this was a source of contention, particularly a sore spot with divorced families. I saw that, witnessed that firsthand. You had one parent that was terrified of the COVID pandemic and said, my kid has to get jabbed, when another parent would say this is going to be more toxic for our child than any respiratory virus. So that was a real conundrum. But look, California just continues. This is an ongoing issue with California. I mean, remember when Newsom's top donor was found to have exclusively employed minors, like unaccompanied illegal minors, at their farm? I mean, you do not want to be a parent in California. So what I feel like this is the takeaway. If you're a parent in California, move.
Yeah, I mean,
Will it
Jack,
really go through?
Pardon me?
Do you think it'll really go through AB 495?
It may. I'm not as familiar with the law, but I do believe 2 years ago they passed the legal age of a minor to be 14 years, and if someone was within 10 years of them, then it's not considered rape, and that went through. So this could possibly go through. I think it's going to be voted on by the Appropriations Committee on the 18th. The protest is on the 19th. So if you go to my Substack, at the very bottom, there's 3 ways, especially if you're a California resident, that you can send an objection letter to the Appropriations Committee, and there's a link that you can contact your state representative and tell them to absolutely vote no. So, I mean, for the Appropriations Committee, that's all about the fiscal responsibility. So how much money is this going to cost? You can let them know this is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits that parents are going to be bringing against the state, because a child either got kidnapped or they had a medical procedure done to them that was, not with their consent. I mean, we have to keep in mind too, we have a law here that if you want to leave another state, if a child is, 14 years old or 12 years old and they want to change their gender, well, they can come to California, and we're a sanctuary city for the transgender surgery. We're a sanctuary city for illegal immigrants. I mean, we're a sanctuary city basically for, hell. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, they do want us to flee the state.
Yeah, there's a reason. My husband's a native of California. There's a reason we don't live there. Besides, I'm just a Virginia girl and I love Virginia. Karen Kingston, thank you for bringing this to our attention. This is definitely a bill we need the progression of. We need to keep our eye on. Everyone needs to fight it. We've actually followed the story of one of those fathers who was from a divorced household, and the mother is transitioning the child, getting medical treatment that the father doesn't consent, and it is the mother, but think it could be anyone in your family if this bill went through. It's just like you said, California has become the sanctuary city for just debauchery, right? Sanctuary state for debauchery in general, just any terrible idea or terrible evil thing. Which is sad because it's such a beautiful, beautiful state. I lived there and I loved it when I lived there, but it's become a hellhole. Thank you so much. We'll keep our eye on this, Karen. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Emerald. God bless.
We'll have our daily Swamp Watch after the break. Stay tuned.
Whether it's being a weekend warrior or spending time with your family, feeling your best is the key to doing the things you love. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Nirvanta. It's a natural solution designed to help you stay active and live well naturally. Nirvanta is a topical blend of all natural essential oils like frankincense, myrrh, and a proprietary gold standard plant stock extract. It's perfect for your hands, feet, knees, back, or anywhere else that needs a little extra care. Use Nirvanta proactively as part of your daily maintenance routine, and you're guaranteed you're going to feel the difference. Simply massage Nirvanta in for at least 60 seconds, 2 to 3 times a day to get the best results. And if you're not completely satisfied, you get your money back. No questions asked. There's simply no risk and no reason not to try Nirvanta today. Right now, you get 15% off with code Lindell exclusively at nirvantahealth.com. So stop reaching out for that medicine cabinet. Get Nirvanta instead and experience the difference. Go to nirvantahealth.com. Use code Lindell to get 15% off today. Nirvanta Health. Live well naturally.
The Justice Department has confirmed it is convening a grand jury to investigate whether former President Barack Obama and his president at the time, Joe Biden, were part of a coordinated criminal conspiracy to falsely link President Donald J. Trump to Russia. Our White House correspondent, Kara Castronova, has a story in detail from the White House in today's Swamp Watch.
The tables have turned. The Department of Justice has confirmed it is now convening a grand jury to investigate whether Obama-era officials, including Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, engaged in a criminal conspiracy to falsely link President Donald J. Trump to Russia. This historic move comes nearly a decade after the infamous Russiagate conspiracy hoax was set in motion and raises serious legal questions for the very officials who weaponized our intelligence agencies against a political opponent. I got the opportunity to ask President Trump this question last week.
Will Hillary Clinton finally be investigated for election fraud?
I hope so. I hope so. I don't know whether or not that'll happen, but I hope so.
Looks like the president got his wish. According to multiple sources and declassified intelligence, this grand jury is examining evidence that Hillary Clinton personally approved the plan to fabricate the Russia hoax in 2016. And then Vice President Joe Biden and President Barack Obama were briefed on the plan, as confirmed in Brennan's own handwritten notes. If proven true, they could face serious federal criminal charges, including, but not limited to, conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, abuse of power and civil rights violations under color of law, and seditious conspiracy if elements of the seditious hoax were intended to overthrow or disable the functioning of the executive branch. This was not some rogue operation. It was a coordinated, treasonous attack on American democracy from within the highest levels of power.
Insurrectionist, domestic terrorist, domestic terrorist.
And here's what matters now. Joe Biden and Barack Obama no longer hold office. They are private citizens. They are not immune from subpoenas or prosecutions for any role in the conspiracy that continued after they left office. And even worse for Biden, he wasn't just involved after the fact. As vice president in 2016, he was allegedly briefed and complicit while the Russia hoax was being launched. And here's the fun twist. The very obstruction, 1512, and conspiracy charges that were weaponized against regular Americans on January 6th, often without fair trials, are now being aimed squarely at the powerful elites who many believe cooked up the fake J6 witch trials and may have conspired to rig an election and destroy a presidency. With the statute of limitations still ticking, because the conspiracy may have continued through 2020, 2021, and even into the Biden presidency, this grand jury has the authority to hold every single conspirator accountable. And for once, the question is no longer if they'll be held to account. The question is, when will the indictments drop? And will Obama and Biden face justice? And will Hillary Clinton finally be prosecuted? At the White House in Washington, D.C., for Lindell TV, I'm Kara Castronova.
Thank you for that, Kara. I would add, when will the arrest take place? Kara's been very busy at the White House. In fact, yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order on Olympic security where Kara Castronova was, and she asked POTUS whether his administration would consider genetic testing for Olympic athletes and if the Justice Department would pursue charges against men masquerading as women to compete, and listen to his response.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. On transgender athletes in the Olympics, back to the safety, especially of female combat boxers, will the Department of Justice considering pressing charges against any man that tries to masquerade as a woman coming into this country to beat up American athletes? And secondly, would your administration consider genetic testing so that these people can prove that they're actually women competing?
Well, I think there is going to be a very strong form of testing as far as charges. I'd have to ask the Attorney General about that. I don't know. But there will be a very, very strong form of testing. And if the test doesn't come out appropriately, they won't be in the Olympics.
As a reminder, we can be in the White House asking the important questions like Kara just did of President Donald Trump with the support of MyPillow.com. So when you support MyPillow, you're supporting programming like this. Just go to MyPillow.com, use your promo code TRUTH. Mike has so many fantastic products. You'll get amazing discounts when you use the promo code TRUTH, or call the toll-free number you see at the bottom of your screen, 800-944-5396, 800-944-5396. And that's it for me today. See you tomorrow, and that's the absolute truth.